All right, so today we are going to talk about women in the apocalypse. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I know that there are a couple of new subscribers since my last comic review video talking about Batman comics. So if you're new here, I'd like to say welcome. Hello, my name is Jessica. These days I have been reading a lot of comics and I did pick up on a thread which was kick-ass women in survival scenarios, or in the apocalypse, or in dystopian futures. So I thought I'd put them all in one stack, and I think with this stack in particular, if you like one of these, you're likely to enjoy the other ones as well. This is Poison Ivy, The Virtuous Cycle, her first and only solo run that just started in 2022, so it's pretty recent. And we have the creators listed here: G. Willow Wilson, Marcio Takara, and Arif Prianto. Shout out to Indonesians working in comics. I see you. Everybody knows who Poison Ivy is, right? You don't have to be a hardcore fan. You don't even have to be a fan of comics to know who Poison Ivy is. Her cultural impact is just that strong. She is a hardcore environmentalist, she's a plant lady, and her whole thing is to destroy humanity and just let plants thrive. That is the core of her character motivations, that is what she wants. And this story poses the question, what would it actually take for Ivy to destroy the world, and what would that do to her as a character and as a person on the inside? While this comic does have a post-apocalyptic feel to it, it is technically a pre-apocalyptic story because Ivy is in the process of carrying out her master plan, her master work, which is to infect the world with some deadly fungal spore. It does have remnants of The Last of Us in there. If you are into a lot of spore horror and deadly mycelium, you are going to enjoy this comic. But we also see her at a point where she is slightly weakened, so she has lost a part of her powers. While she still has control over plants, she has severed her connection to the green, which is the power source for all plant life on Earth. So you can see her more of like a metahuman in terms of power levels, whereas when she is connected to the green, she is basically a god. So one of the main conflicts in this book, one of her main internal conflicts, is the loss of power and dealing with that, and what that does to her ego and her confidence along the way as she tries to figure out whether this plan will actually work and whether it's something that she actually wants to begin with. Because while Ivy is in a more weakened state, she is more desperate, we also see her feel more connected to humanity in certain ways. She's confronted with her mortality because she is human again, mostly human at least. And so when she thinks about wiping out the entire human race, she realizes that maybe do I want to do that? Like, there are some people that I do love. She still has love for Harley. They're still in a relationship, even though Harley's like somewhere back in Gotham. And she meets people along the way where she's like, I know you're not a bad person. And she recognizes the fact that not all people are bad. It seems like a very simple lesson, but one of the things about Ivy, and because she's so driven by her ideology, she's a very like ideologically motivated villain. You have villains like that, and then you have villains who are motivated because of like personal reasons, and then you have like more opportunistic villains, but Ivy is like strong and pure ideology. So I think when she starts thinking outside of that, and when she starts thinking about the practicalities and what that ideology would involve in practice, that's when she finds the tricky part. I think the art is also stunning. It really gives a lot of these earthy tones, not just the greens, but also the browns and the yellows. And you can see how beautiful and horrifying plant life is. You get some really gorgeous pages of like these spreads of the green, this psychedelic effect that Ivy experiences when she crosses over those worlds and the boundaries between the two. And you get to see all the gorgeous little details of the spores, the mushrooms, these toxic looking Jurassic World plants, It is absolutely beautiful. If you love biology, if you love kind of body horror, there's a little bit of body horror in this, but mixed in with plants, so like plant horror. I think you'd really appreciate the artwork in this because I totally did. It really conveys that feeling of nature being this horrifyingly mesmerizing and beautiful thing that could kill us all in an instant, and we don't really understand how it works, but we just want to keep looking at it. I also really like Ivy's costume designs in this comic. They've given her more of a low-key, tomboyish look. She's still very feminine, but she's dressed like she is on the run, like she's undercover. She doesn't want to be seen because she is about to commit a pretty devastating act of eco-terrorism. Alright, so the next comic I'm really excited to talk about, which is Golden Rage, published by Image Comics by Chrissy Williams, Laurie Knight, Sophie Dodgson, and Becca Carey. This is a fantastically, stunningly original and kick-ass and all around really exciting comic to read. So it's like a dystopian story where in the future, old women are like thrown onto an island after they've reached a certain age because they're deemed no longer useful to society. And things happen on the island, things that are very battle royale in nature. A little Lord of the Flies, a little Handmaid's Tale thrown in there. So it's just a mix of survivalist dystopia, and it's such a cool premise where a woman finds herself washed up ashore on this island, and she is the youngest person there. She's like in her 30s, I assume, and she immediately sees that everything is up in flames and old women are like fighting and killing and maiming each other. And she gets taken in and looked after by this group of women who have a base of operations in like this lighthouse sanctuary on the cliffside. And they're kind of like the rebel alliance of the island. And the protagonist claims that she doesn't even know why she's there. She doesn't remember how she got here. But the other women start to get suspicious, thinking that she might be the key to figuring out how to get off this island, because we really don't know much about the island itself, why it was built, when it was built, how long these women have been there for. And it's one of those stories where you have a really interesting core cast of characters to begin with, but then you also meet like quirky characters in between. And I think one of the strongest parts of this comic is the way it ties in the world building and the unraveling of answers with its setting. You can tell that each place that they visit has some sort of story behind it and significance to them. For example, the lighthouse, their base of operations, it's very much a safe space. There are like thermal hot springs and these beautiful cliffside views overlooking the ocean. It's very like pristine azure blues. And then you walk further up towards the woods, the forests, and then you see ghosts of all the dead women who have died on the island, which is a little bit haunting. And then you go further up and you see some of their burial sites where they leave out their dead bodies all wrapped up and mummified for the birds to eat. And that's where you get like more of the harsher side of the wilderness. They don't really stereotype the experience of women being just one thing because they have different characters that they switch perspectives from, and the switch between every perspective is done so smoothly and flawlessly. And the creators here have done such a good job at giving each character a distinct look, a distinct voice as well. I can automatically tell who's speaking, and distinct personalities and motivations. And I think that is really what makes this book shine. And most importantly, of course, the ageism aspect is dealt with so, so well, because I think that's what makes the feminist messages stand out and what makes it resonate so much. It's something that we don't explore often in comics. Protagonists in media in general are younger, and we don't really see older people as the hero as much, especially older women. Alright, so the next one is another one from Image Comics. It's called I Hate This Place by Kyle Starks, Artyom Topilin, and Lee Lawridge. And this one is not so much a post-apocalyptic comic as it is more of a horror ghost-themed comic. I would say it's like X-Files meets Cabin in the Woods. And I feel like reading this right after Golden Rage, I had to readjust my mindset and kind of rebalance my expectations because I wasn't sure how I felt about this at first, but I think I reread it and then I kind of appreciated it more for what it was. But before we get into the stuff that maybe I didn't like so much, I will tell you what I did love about this comic. Number one, the art is stunning. I love the inking style and I love the colors they've used. A lot of monochrome panels, a lot of duochrome panels that make use of very bold, very saturated colors, which I love. It really does give it that X-Files Ghostbusters vibe because sometimes when they pop out the greens, I'm like, that's ectoplasm green right there. I don't know if anyone's ever watched Martin Mystery. That was my cartoon of choice, one of many when I was a kid, and that reminded me of this a little bit. But the protagonists here are two women in a relationship. They're dating. It's a stable but still fairly new relationship. They don't know everything about each other yet, and one of them inherits a house from her aunt in the middle of nowhere, which is why I said cabin in the woods. And she doesn't really know much about the house itself or what her aunt had been up to because she was very ill and she was very reclusive. And when she gets there, she finds out the reasons why her aunt left her this house. Spoilers, it's haunted. That's the start and end of every horror movie premise. Spoilers, it's haunted. And there's a really fun scene, which I admit is one of my favorite tropes in horror movies, which is when they like pull a old cassette or videotape and pop it in the television, and then there's a message from someone who died explaining to them like the rules of the house. Don't let the ghost touch you, never go into the woods, and do not let the horned man catch you. If you see him, you run the other way. So it's pretty fun because it kind of sets it up that way. And I think it takes place over a couple of days, so it's a very like contained story. So it's a very like tightly paced, fast-paced story with a lot of action, a lot of gore in it as well. Just to warn you, if that's not your thing, you will see a lot of guts spilling out and blood all over the place. But I think the art style handles it in a way where it's not too bad, at least for me, because sometimes, like when it's too realistic, I'm like, this is a little uncomfortable. I will still read it, but this is more of like a cartoon style, so I think the tolerance levels can be adjusted. Anyway, in the meantime, while these protagonists are trying to figure out what's happening to their house, and they've also like employed some people, they've recruited some experts who could help them in their ghost busting quest. There's also like this other overarching plot with some guy who's trying to get some cash that's like hidden somewhere on the premises. And also at the same time, towards the end of the comic, we find out that there are some like government men who probably know of all the weird stuff that's happening in this house and they've been monitoring it for a while. And I think that aspect of the story really got me interested, but that only came in towards the end. And I think the reason why I had mixed feelings about this one is because even though the premise is really cool, the art is stunning, and it has all of the tropes that I love, I was feeling a bit lacking towards the characters in the story. Even the protagonists, who we share the most amount of time with, there was just not enough there, I think, for me to latch onto them and for me to really remember them. They're both given their own backstories, yes. One of them, Gabby, who is the girlfriend of the woman who inherits the house, she's seen to be more of like a survivalist type. You know, she loves her guns, she brings her guns to the cabin, and even though her girlfriend's like, oh, do you have to bring your guns? And she's like, you never know what's in there. And that conflict runs through the whole book where she has to kind of like hide her guns to make sure it's out of sight of her girlfriend who doesn't like to see it. but then like also when the time comes to use it against one of the monsters or the ghosts, she misses her shot and kind of beats herself up for it because she's like, I'm supposed to be the one protecting you, blah blah blah. And I think that is probably one of the only character moments that stood out to me. But apart from that, it just fell a little flat. And again, I think this is also very subjective. And I actually think I was missing more from the main character herself, who inherited the house and who has this connection with her aunts. I mean, we have some flashback scenes of her when she was a child. She's like, I've only been to this house once, and something weird happened to me back then. I wonder if that has anything to do with what's going on now. But I just don't think she was as strong a protagonist as she could have been. And again, that overarching plotline with the guy who is looking for some cash in their house, it ends up being like a climatic confrontation. And to me, it just wasn't like emotionally gripping in that way because, again, just some guy. But overall, I still think it's a very well made comic. I think if you are looking for more of a lighter, a quick read that's straight to the point, action, plot, mystery, this would probably satisfy your needs. And I think if a second volume came out, I would definitely pick it up because I want to see where the story goes next. And if you've read this comic or any of the ones I've talked about so far, do let me know in the comments below. Alright, so we've reached the end of this video, and I have one more comic that I wanted to talk to you about today, which is Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King, Bilquis Evely, and Mateus Lopez. It is probably one of my favorite comics of all time now. Ever since I read it, I have not been able to stop thinking about it, and it is just one of those where I had to sit down after and I had to reflect upon a lot of things in my life. And I just kept on thinking, was that one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life? And the answer is yes. If you haven't read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow yet, let me give you a short pitch. It is a cosmic road trip story. It is a revenge western tale. And it is also a coming of age story that takes Supergirl's past experiences in the fact that she had to live with her whole planet dying. And to me, this comic has the perfect characterization of Supergirl. Because when you compare her and her cousin, Superman, the defining thing that makes them different is the fact that she was a fully grown teenager by the time Krypton blew up. And she is a survivor in a very different way that Superman is. She knows firsthand, well, first of all, what Krypton was like, so she has that connection to her home planet, to her people, her civilization, and she has a much broader cultural knowledge of the other types of planets and civilizations out there. And number two, she had to live with that trauma. So it makes total sense to me that she would have a more cynical outlook on things. And this whole adventure in Woman of Tomorrow starts when she goes to this planet with a red sun on it because she wants to get drunk on her 21st birthday. And we see that she is very lonely. She is kind of looking for an escape from her life on Earth. A young woman named Ruthie who witnessed her father be killed by some mercenary man, and seemingly for no reason. So she sees Supergirl arrive on her planet. She sees Supergirl getting into a bar fight, beating up men like twice her size. Even though there is a red sun and she is kind of depowered a little bit, she is still pretty damn strong. So Ruthie walks up to Supergirl and says, "Will you help me find the man who killed my father and kill him?" And Supergirl's like, "Sorry, I don't kill people. And besides, I was just here to get drunk and I'm on my way home now." And while Supergirl is very reluctant to get involved at first, she does eventually go along. And the whole comic is told from Ruthie's perspective, so you get a lot of very beautiful prose, very poetic narration from Ruthie that shows you Supergirl from her lens. And I think the outsider point of view in this comic is something that is really unique and special, and something that's a little bit outside the box from conventional superhero comics. Again, I think it really has like a literary quality to it. And you see her admire Supergirl and look up to her like she is this outlaw who suddenly came into town and changed everything. That is the impact Supergirl had on her. And so she's making all these like observations on Supergirl, who has ups and downs in her journey. She is often very reserved. She gets emotionally closed off when she sees things happening on planets that reminds her of what happened to her on Krypton. So there's a lot of like genocide, there's a lot of heavy stuff here. And what this comic manages to achieve in the end with that outsider perspective and Ruthie handling the dialogue is that the art really shines when you're showing Supergirl doing her miraculous feats across the universe. Like I have never seen Supergirl look this powerful. The colors are just so gorgeous. It's like going on a psychedelic roller coaster ride with one of the most powerful beings in the universe. I could go on and on about this comic forever, and I might even make a separate video for it one day, but I think we could stop there for now. I hope you know how much I would really, really recommend you pick this up if you haven't already. Again, my favorite characterization of Supergirl. I know James Gunn is planning to make a movie about it. And if you have any recommendations for comics which have a similar vibe to any of the ones that I talked about today, do leave them in the comments. I've really appreciated everyone's recommendations. In my last Batman video, I have a huge list of comics now that I'm about to buy. So yeah, I'm always looking for new reads, and I hope you guys have a fantastic week ahead. And if you did enjoy this video, please do like and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!